welcome to WLT Book Buzz.
I'm Bunmi.
And I'm Lauda. And we're both former interns at WLT and self-professed book lovers.
We both currently work at Penguin Random House, and we love to travel in our free time so much.
When, we're not reading, obviously.
Duh. We're starting this show for WLT as an opportunity to exemplify and uplift diverse voices in literature. We are hoping that each month we will highlight a variety of books. We'll try one picture book, one middle grade, one YA, one adult, maybe some graphic novels, and we'll probably have some honorable mentions because really, who can just recommend one book? We're just going to hopefully have a lot of fun. And so we thought we would highlight books written by Asian writers. We will probably have to do another issue or another video about Pacific Islanders later on, just because there is like Hawaii, Samoa, Papua New Guinea, just so many other places that people do not include as part of the Asian population, but are celebrated during this month. But as we went through our own recommendations, we were like, these are just like, there's just so much. So those are two separate things. And so we might eventually do a Pacific Islander episode later on, but specifically we're going to highlight Asian authors this month.
Yeah. So we've combed through some of our favorite books, which, is not an easy task, but we have some selections that we're really excited to talk about and share.
So I'll get started with my first picture book recommendation. But before I do that, actually, one of my favorite Asian authors is Lynn, and she actually just started a new project called Asians Every Day, and she's collected basically a database of picture books that highlight the Asian experience. And so we'll have that link in our show notes, and she also started a TikTok video where she's going to talk about each video individually, and so check her out at Lynn Author. But if you're looking for more picture books beyond what me and Lada recommend, here, that's a great place to start. And so my picture book is The Ocean Calls by Tina Cho, and it's illustrated by Jess X Snow. This book is set in South Korea, and it's basically, the subtitle is a Hanyo mermaid story. And it basically is the story about this granddaughter who really wants to be a Hanyo like her grandmother, but she's kind of scared of the ocean. So her grandmother kind of shows her everyday life, and and it shows her just kind of guiding her through the experience of diving underwater and just really living that tradition of the Hanyo. And if you don't know who the Hanyo are, they are indigenous people from Jeju Island, which is off of South Korea, and they were kind of the original oceanographers, original environmentalists. They basically dive with no breathing material, so they're like the original scuba divers, which is where they kind of have this mermaid feel to it. And Tina basically tells this beautiful story, and Jess captures it so beautifully. There's like little hints of like mermaid fins and stuff in the illustrations with the shadows and with the way the fish follow their bodies. It's like so creative. And if you want to like see some of the illustrations or hear the author and illustrator speak, there's this bookstore called Little Shop of Stories that actually did a Facebook Live with both of them. And it was just like magnificent. It was great.
Not gonna lie, pretty much will read anything that like has mermaids in it because I would have chosen to be a mermaid as a profession. I'm pretty sure
that is a legitimate goal. So why not?
I don't know why we haven't figured that out. Like we can do a lot of things, but we cannot yet become mermaids. So my picture book selection is My First Day by Huang Wen Wang, illustrated by Wen Kim Lin, and it is such a beautiful story. It's set in Vietnam, and both the illustrator and author are Vietnamese. And from the first moment I laid my eyes on this book, you just are like looking through these gorgeous spreads, and it's about this little boy, and he is going to his first day of school, and he's on this boat, and he's going through reeds, and he encounters a bunch of different animals, and it's kind of equal parts adventure, equal parts mystery, in the sense that you don't know what's going to come out next, or like what animals he's going to see, or who he's going to meet along the journey. There's some elements of like danger, but it's like very, very, I guess, chill danger because it is a picture book. But the spreads are some of the most beautiful picture book spreads I've seen in a book in, I don't know, years. Mildly obsessed with it, could stare at it for ages. And it's just like a really sweet story because it showcases a child doing like an everyday thing, but it's not an everyday thing for me because like that, I wouldn't take a boat to school, but I love learning about other cultures and kind of seeing how they interact with the landscapes around them, and just being able to get a glimpse of his life with like some adventure and whimsy thrown in. it was just so good. So I read it, fell in love with it, cannot recommend it enough.
I have actually not seen this one. And so I'm literally, after we are done, probably going to go to the bookstore and look this up because I need to now see these beautiful pictures. And the idea of going to, I can't swim, I can't swim very well, but the idea of going to go on a boat would be like so cool. So I kind of really would love to, I'm going to check this out for sure.
Yeah, please do.
Do you want to kick off middle grade then selections?
Yeah. So some backstory on the sense that like it's really hard to pick like one book.
So hard.
So we thought to like help you and help ourselves because we read pretty much books of all variety and ages. We would highlight some in different age categories because, you know, depending on like what you do, the ages of your children, what you might teach in school, or, you know, like maybe you have friends or family that you want to give them some diverse reads. So we've kind of broken them out by this kind of way. So my middle grade selection is Other Words for Home by Jasmine Warga. So this is a story and it's told completely in verse. It's about this middle school age girl named Jade, and she's a Syrian refugee and they moved to Ohio. And it just kind of talks about, you know, some of the stuff that she goes through living in Ohio, not having very many people who have her background, not speaking the language as well. And, you know, it's so poignant. It's so beautiful. And it made me cry. And there's a quote from the book that says, there's an Arabic proverb that says, she makes you feel like a loaf of freshly baked bread. And that's honestly how I felt after reading this. Like I had to take a moment, sit back, and just like seeing the world through Jade's eyes. It was so good because I would never have an opportunity to kind of like see those things from her perspective. And there was so much kindness and empathy in it. And I just, so heartwarming.
Yeah, I actually remember reading this book myself, and I love that it was in verse because it does make it read quickly, which is not why I read a book, but it was just one of these things that you get so immersed into it, and it's not a very long read. But even with it being like so sparse, it was so rich, like you were saying, within so much. And, I mean, I feel like that proverb is a compliment we should just be throwing off to people every so often. Like, you make me feel like a loaf of freshly, like, you know, baked bread. And it's just like, how like nice is that?
Really the best.
Yeah, well, I really loved also a novel in verse that I wanted to bring up, and it's called Under the Broken Sky, excuse me, by Mariko Nagai. And this is actually set in China, in Manchuria, which is like the northern part of China that's at the border of the Soviet Union, or now Russia, but at the time, because it's set in World War II, it was the Soviet Union. And basically, this is something I did not know until I read this book. Apparently, Japan had occupied Manchuria and sent basically a whole bunch of settlers to there and kind of kicked a lot of the Chinese people off their land in order for Japanese people to be settlers. And so our main character Natsu, and her sister Asa are the Japanese settlers in Manchuria. And so they live there with their dad in this village, and, you know, they farm. She has a horse that she loves to like go riding on, and this, you know, has a lovely, happy life until, you know, her dad is actually recruited to go to war because unbeknownst to them, Japan's losing the war. We know this because, come on, we know history, but they do not know this. They think Japan's winning the war against the Americans and against the rest of the world. And her dad's recruited to join the war effort. Within a few weeks, war is not going well, and therefore they have to evacuate. And they're basically having to walk to the border of China in order to figure out how to get back to Japan because they realize it's no longer safe for them to stay in China since Japan has lost the war. It's still unclear to her as a child if Japan has lost the war because, come on, the emperor is a god and they worship the emperor, right? She doesn't understand this concept. She's also wondering, well, how will our dad find us? Like, you know, all of these details that she's worrying about, but also feeling like she has to take care of her little sister and they have to stick as a family the entire time, no matter what. And so it basically follows their journey of evacuating. And then also the second half of the book is kind of when they're in this final village waiting to figure out how to get back to Japan, and there's Soviets there, and she's just confused. She's only about 12 years old and she's trying to navigate all these things. And so it made me want to cry multiple times, but it also just was so full of hope and joy. And it was just so beautiful to watch the perseverance of these two sisters throughout it. And it kind of reminded me a little bit of the Newbery Honor book, Inside Out and Back Again by Tong Kai Lai. And the same level of like beauty in the way the poetry was told, and just It was just great. It was a great book.
I know, and it was honestly really hard to like narrow down our middle grade selections because we've read so many. I know that when Bunmi and I were preparing the notes for this, we both literally almost chose Front Desk by Kelly Yang, which I had not read ever, and I read for the first time this year, and it was so groundbreaking. It tackled so many issues head on, but without doing it in like a trivial way, without making it dark, but also being like completely relevant and necessary for the story. And I was like, I mean, I felt empowered by the story and also wished I could be as brave as the girl in there. So I don't know if you wanted to chime in with anything.
The thing about Front Desk that I also love is, so it's set in the 80s, but what's so cool is it's technically based off of Kelly Yang's true life story. So it's partially autobiographical, which made the story even cooler to me to know that this was the experience that she has. If you've not read it, it's based about a girl who helps her parents run the front desk of the hotel they work at, and just some of the challenges they face as immigrants trying to navigate this world. It has a great sequel called Three Keys, which also tackles immigration a bit more head on, especially immigration and law, and some of that tension that happens there when you're the immigrant and there's potentially a law that's being passed about you, and just some of those feelings. And that's kind of what Mia, our main character, has to deal with. And a third one's coming out in the fall, which I'm really excited about, where Mia gets to return home for the first time with her family because they like actually have kind of made it in America. So it's kind of cool in that sense. Another one I was going to mention is Grace Lynn, who I mentioned earlier. She actually also writes middle grade, not just picture books. And two of the ones that I thought about was When the Mountain Meets the Moon, which is kind of a made up folklore and folktale, but it's also interweaving real life folktale from the culture. So it's really cool the way she weaves in this story that's a folktale, but also there's folktales being told in the folktale. It's super cool. And then I'm a big Disney junkie. And so she happened to write Mulan Before the Sword, which is like the prequel to the Mulan story. And oh my gosh, this book was so good. I was in love with Mulan more than I had been beforehand. And it's just like awesome. So Mulan's such a great character, and she brings her to life as a young girl in a way that neither Disney movies do. And I just was obsessed with that book as well. Oh, and one more, because I just can't help it. Stand Up, Amy Chung by Jessica Kim. Hilarious, but also like, just sweet. I mean, it's about an immigrant girl who wants to be a comedian, but come on, your parents want you to be a doctor. And her parents are basically trying to get her, like, have her, you know, get into this special school and do all these other things. And she's like, I just want to make people laugh. And so it's like that tension between like your immigrant parent dreams, which they give up so much to come to this country. And she recognized that, but also she wants to pursue these fun dreams that they see as privileged dreams. And so her tension of kind of like trying to figure that out. And the best part of this story is there's a mistaken identity because she's basically lying about who she is to be in this comedy club that she's going to, and then also lying to her parents and just lying to everybody. So it's just like such a thing that a kid would do, but also full of a lot of heart and just beauty when you see the way the relationships pan out and stuff.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I haven't read that one yet, but it is definitely on my to-read list. I have, I think, just 2 middle grade honorable mentions.
Yeah, middle grade's our favorite, if you can't tell. We love middle grade.
Oh, I know, it's so good. All 13, The Incredible Cave Rescue of the Thai Boys Soccer Team. It was a Newbery winner from 2021, and it's nonfiction. And, you know, you had all seen the story in the news about some of the group of the boys in the soccer team and them being trapped in the cave. And I like saw it very cursory, you know, I saw it in the back of my mind and I was like, ooh, that was crazy. But like reading the story and seeing what lengths went through to get these boys out. And also, sorry, spoiler alert, but it was on the news. They all made it out safely with like hardly any damages or, you know, like health problems after being trapped in like a cave for, I should remember how many days, but it was like, I'm not even going to try and guess because I'll be so wrong. But being trapped in like a cold, you know, frigid cave, you don't have any food. It's really hard to keep warm. And then you're in the dark. Like you can't see, like, you know, it was just like amazing because like the author really went into like the perspective of like, she interviewed some of the boys. Basically, this was such a fantastic story. The author got the sides from the boys' perspective. She also interviewed some of the people who were like outside the cave, strategizing on how to free these boys. And there were so many aspects of it that I didn't even realize how convoluted it would be to go inside this cave, and like the people who have like diving experience for this kind. Of like risk was crazy. So I read that. It was fascinating, and it was a really quick read, despite being like a nonfiction book about, kids trapped in a cave, which isn't, it was just very interesting, and eye-opening. And it was just really cool to see how all of like the country and then the people came together and then worked to get these boys free. And then, of course, I would be remiss if I did not mention When You Trap a Tiger by Tay Keller. Not gonna lie, the company that I work for publishes this, and when it came out, / when I got to read it last year, I fell in love with it. I thought it was so great. It's equal parts family, magic, a little bit of magical realism, which is, I feel like, pretty impressive to do in a middle grade book. But it interweaves Korean folklore and family and belonging. And I read it and I cried and I recommended it to people. And then it won the Newbery. And we were so excited. So now we get to champion it even more. So
yeah,
that book.
I'm actually getting to lead a book club with some homeschoolers over this book later on this summer. And I cannot wait to have them fall in love with it just as much as you and I have, because
yay,
I'm like, yay. All right, so we're done with middle grade. I promise, no more. We'll move into YA now. And young adults, this is, I say, any but kids, 13 and older maybe is what these book recommendations are for. And so for YA, I am recommending Written in the Stars by Aisha Saeed. And I had the pleasure of listening to her speak at a conference. She was part of a panel, and she was sharing about just kind of how, a lot of people in America, we have these we have these sensibilities about what's right and what's wrong. And one of the things that we sometimes think is wrong is arranged marriages. And she shared about how she's in an arranged marriage and she's thriving, perfectly happy. But she also recognized that there is a history of an ugly side of that. And there is an ugly side of that. And she wanted to explore that in this book. And so Written in the Stars follows this girl named Nalia, who is I think she's a junior or senior in high school, but she basically, her parents are conservative, but they have also given her a lot of freedom. So they told her, look, you can wear whatever you want. You can put your hair however you want to. You can study whatever you want to. You can even have whatever job you want to. We're going to have no limitations on anything you do except for who you marry. And her one rule is that she's not allowed to date, and that ultimately they would be the ones to pick her husband. And she's first like, yeah, that's fine. I could do that. They give me so much freedom. But the problem is she kind of started falling in love with one of her classmates. And Saif. And Saif is also Pakistani. So she's like, it can't be that bad, right? If we tell them that we're together, they're gonna be like, at least you chose, the right type of a boy from our country. And so she thinks it's fine. And, she has a secret date planned with him and everything else. And it kind of goes wrong because her parents find out and they lose their mind. And so they basically tell her, you know what, clearly we did the wrong thing by never taking you back to Pakistan. Clearly everything's wrong. It's wrong. And so they take her back to Pakistan and they basically have her reconnect with her roots. And, she has to dress in a certain way suddenly. She's not allowed to speak out loud as much as she's often to, because she's basically staying with her, I can't remember if it's her mom, it's one of her uncles who's even more conservative than her parents are. And she just is like feeling so restricted and suffocated. But she's like, you know what, it is what it is. I'm going to go back home to America and it's fine. Except her parents leave and they don't take her with them. And then suddenly this boy starts showing up with his family. And then suddenly it's like, you're married. You're going to go live with this man and his family. And she's like, wait, what? And so that's kind of just from there, her just like trying to figure out her life. And can she be happy in this marriage? Can she be happy with Saif? Does she want to go back to America? Can she embrace this new lifestyle? And it just kind of goes from there. And I can't say much more without spoiling it, but it was so good. I definitely cried. I was shocked at times. I wanted to throw the book a few times, but I also could not quit reading until I was done with it because it was just so good. And Aisha points out that this is something that does happen still in Pakistan. So it is a real reality. But also talking about just like tradition and culture, there's a value to some of those things. And there's always this tension between the modern world and the ancient world, in a sense, in a lot of these countries, with a lot of these traditions. And her parents really honestly felt like they're doing what was best for their daughter. And so some of those things that she's exploring throughout the book. And so I'm not gonna say much more because it'd be spoiling it to say anything else.
I know. And also I'll confess that I have read this book and I remember being a little bit shocked by how the author went about it, and I don't also want to spoil anything, but it was very eye-opening because it is completely different from anything I've lived. So I really appreciated the perspective of like doing it in a way that was genuine, but also like questioning and letting you come to your own conclusions.
Yeah, and I love that because she's gone through an arranged marriage. It wasn't just her imposing her like, this is a wrong thing, so let me judge that it's wrong. It was the fact that I've had a happy experience, but I know it's not true for everyone to have a happy experience. So let me explore what that other side could look like, because I think like it's really easy for someone who's never experienced it to assume that like that's the worst thing that could ever happen to you. But is it really? And so I think it was cool to see that as well too.
Yeah, for sure. My YA selection, taking a little bit of a different approach, is Six Crimson Cranes by Elizabeth Lim. It actually comes out in July 2021, but it is basically a diverse fairy tale retelling, which, not gonna lie, fairy tale retellings, I will read them anytime, anywhere. But also if they're diverse retellings, that is like the pinnacle of great.
Yep.
But the main character is a princess named Shiori, and she has to leave her kingdom because of her forbidden magic. And her 6 brothers are turned into cranes, and the spell that someone has put on her makes it so that if she says a word, one of her brothers will die. So there's a bunch of other plots and stuff going along in the background, but basically she has to figure out A, how to save her brothers, B, how to get back to her kingdom, and she has to do it all while not speaking.
That is insane. Which I know it's a fairy tale, but I'm still feeling shocked hearing you like explain this. I'm pretty sure I've read this fairy tale before, but I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah. But it's just, I like Elizabeth Lim. I read one of her books a couple years ago, and she's basically like a must-read author. Whenever I see that she has a new book, I'm like, ooh, I want to read Elizabeth Lim because I think she's so great.
That is awesome. What's funny is I'm first of all jealous that you have an early read of this because it's totally down my alley as well too. But I don't have her as a must-read author just yet, but I probably will. But she also wrote a Mulan book, which is where the only book I've read of hers.
Yes.
But Disney has a whole like retelling of, and she did the Mulan one, and it basically is like Mulan decides to go to the underworld in order to rescue Shen, because like that knife and the whole scene where like the avalanche happens, basically imagine it did not go well, and instead Shen ends up like being at the brink of death because of the injury instead of Mulan being hurt by the injuries. And so she goes to the underworld and has to travel, and that was so good. I wanted to make a movie of this because like this whole alternate reality of Mulan that I was just like, what? And you watch them fall in love in a new way, and it's just like, oh. And so after that I was like, I need to check out more of hers, but I haven't done it yet. And so now I'm going to add this to my to read. So
yes, I will say that I did read that book specifically because Elizabeth wrote it. And also because low-key obsessed with Mulan. She's one of the best princesses. I don't know if she's actually a princess, but
I'm considered one actually, even though she's not by exactly a princess, but they've added her to the list, I think.
Yeah, well deserved, obviously, but yeah. So I do have a few honorable mentions.
Okay, go for it. I probably do too.
Yeah, A Pho Love Story by Lon Lei. It's basically, like a foodie YA, super cute. It's a little bit like Romeo and Juliet, but like if your parents had like conflicting, like restaurants.
And no one dies, I'm guessing, either at the end.
Yeah, no one dies. A better Romeo and Juliet retelling because it's A, diverse, B, not as much death, and has really, really good food descriptions. Honestly, made me a little bit hungry. While reading, I may have eaten some noodles afterwards because I just wished I lived in a restaurant. Even though logically I would not actually want to work in a restaurant, I would just rather read about it and then but cannot recommend that one enough. And then the other one is Surprise, Not Surprise, A Taste for Love by Jennifer Yan. And this one, it like reeled me in because like it was described to me as like Jane Austen meets the Great British Bake Off.
Oh gosh.
And I was like, ooh, I love two of those things so much. So it's so cute and it's so sweet. And I just love reading diverse characters just doing cool things. And if they made movies of either of these two books, I would be so happy because I think that's what the world needs. But
it sounds so cute. Like I'm adding both of them to my TBR. I've seen the story a few times and it's been like, oh, I need to read that. But A Taste for Love is completely new and I'm obsessed with Great British Bake Off. And I'm also obsessed with Jane Austen. So this is totally up my alley as well.
You have to read it. It's so good. So cute and wholesome, I feel like. Sorry, and I know I said I only had two. That's a lie. I have three. A Very Large Expansive Sea by Tara Mahi. This one made me cry. It was cute. It was sweet, but it was also, I think it's about a girl living in the wake of 9/11. And kind of dealing with, like people treating her differently. And then also, learning to break dance.
Oh.
And, and then also like maybe falling in love for the first time. So it has a lot of really interesting angles to it, but another highly recommend.
Okay, well then I'm gonna have to do some honorable mentions too. And so I'm gonna start with Zendaya Menon, who I know you also love.
Love her.
And I actually, funny enough, I've not gotten to meet her yet, but I'm super close because she's involved in the nonprofit that I'm also involved in. So one day we will become besties because I just love everything that she's written. But When Dimple Meets Rishi is her first one. And that's another arranged love story kind of where these two Indian kids are arranged to be married, except one of them does not know this. And so the other one comes up and is like, hi, I'm your husband. It's like, ah! And like, Dimple like throws coffee in his face, like, what is wrong with you? And has no clue why. And she's like at this like college for this summer event that her parents agreed to let her go to, which she was surprised by. And it turns out it's because her parents knew that Rishi was gonna go and they're like, okay, they can finally meet and maybe this will like work out because Dimple's been very opposed to the idea of arranged marriages. Rishi's like a lot more into tradition and is totally open to it. And so they seem like they're on opposite ends of like Indian culture, but it's so cute to watch them like basically fall in love because hey, it's a wild romance. They're gonna fall in love. And this one has like two follow-ups that are in the same Dimple verse as she calls them. And so the next one is There's Something About Sweetie, and this is about Rishi's younger brother and like his love interest. And this is a book that's really great about talking about this body positivity, which I love. And then the newest one is 10 Things I Hate About Pinky, which is about like kind of the Dimple, not Rishi and his brother's like next door neighbor and Sweetie's best friend kind of thing. So it's like, it's all within the same Dimple verse. And she does have some free short stories as well too, through Simon & Schuster's like website. And so there's a few little like tiny stories where you can like follow the couples a bit more. And then she's currently doing fairy tale retellings at the moment. So one of them is, I think Curses and Kisses, and that was like a Beauty and the Beast retelling. And then the new one is about, I love that one too. And the new one is about to just come out. And that one's going to be a retelling of, oh my gosh, I forgot. Is it 12 Days?
Is it Frog's Prince?
Frog Prince, you're right, it's Frog Prince. It's Frog Prince. I was like, I know it's one of those more obscure ones, but yes, you're right. It's a Frog Prince is the next one that's coming out. And so she's great. And then there's also, We Need Diverse Books is a really great nonprofit. And they do these short story anthologies. And one of the ones that they did recently is called 1,000 Beginnings and Endings. And this has like retellings and reimaginings of East Asian and South Asian folklore and mythology. And so there's 16 extraordinary white authors who contribute to this, each of them writing one of the short stories. And if you get the paperback version, you get a bonus story too. So that's some of the ones I want to add on.
Yeah, and I mean, I also say that Zendaya Menon is someone that I automatically add to my to read / if I see any book from her, I immediately just get it because it's so good. And We Need Diverse Voices. I love everything they do. If you're not familiar, follow them on Instagram, check out their website. You got to back these guys up. They're just cool.
Zendaya also actually is writing for adults as well too, in the romance category, and underneath Lily Menon. And so check her out. She's a great follow. And that's also a great lead into our adult recommendations because, I mean, adults read too, although hopefully you also read everything else we just talked about, even if you're an adult.
Yeah, for sure. And I know like we don't want to like keep you here for forever, even though honestly we could sit here and talk about books for hours, and we have, not on this show. So I'm just gonna give you a couple book titles. Know My Name by Chanel Miller. Literally changed my world. It's a book that I think every single person on the planet should read. And then the last one is The Last Girl, My Story of Captivity and My Fight Against the Islamic State by Nadia Murad. Another really hard book, but honestly changed my mindset. And it's, based on her actual life story. And at times it was really hard to read, but very important to hear things from her perspective.
Yeah, and I had to think really hard about which one I was going to pick. I 11th grade year fell in love with Amy Tan when I read The Joy Luck Club, and just was interested in reading more about her. And so one of the books I read was Saving Fish from Drowning by Amy Tan, and this one is set in what was then called Burma, now it's called Myanmar. But I remember it basically it's based on a true story that happened. And so there were 11 Americans who went on vacation to Burma and were supposed to have this beautiful resort experience. And on one of the outings on Christmas morning, they end up getting basically abducted by an indigenous tribe who basically sees one of the teens and thinks the teen is the fulfillment of a prophecy that they had, and they've been waiting for the fulfillment of this prophecy. So they basically, and what's so funny about the book in ways that the Americans are oblivious that they've been abducted. They think this is part of the experience. Oh my gosh, how cool. And so there's a lot of just silly things that happen and blunders. And it kind of really points to how ignorant we can be when we go into other countries and not think about stuff. But then at the same time, it, is also this beautiful story overall about, and what Amy Tan said that she kind of felt like she had a premonition in a dream for many of the things that happened. And so that's how she ultimately ended up writing this book. And then when she found some of the stories and some of the, some of it lined up almost identical to what really did happen, even though she was not on the ground at all. And so it was just really interesting where she just I really felt like I had this automatic writing experience that people, it just came to me.
Yeah, no, that sounds super intriguing. And I know that while we were picking out all of these books, we also had some graphic novels.
We do. We have too many recommendations, but we just couldn't stop.
No, we can't stop, won't stop. I read The Magic Fish by Trung Wen last year, and obsessed with it. It's a graphic novel, a beautiful story about a mother and son relationship, immigration, fairy tale interwoven in, beautiful illustrations, queer identity. This book has everything. And normally when you say that, you're like, oh, you shouldn't have done that. But this book has everything and it's done perfectly. So I could not speak more highly of this book. And then I know that, Bunmi also read it and loved it. So we were one mind for this title. And then if you have not read Good Talk by Mira Jacob, it's about, it's a very interesting graphic novel format, but it's her questioning America and America's perspective on things and racism. And then also the questions that she gets from her son and kind of figuring out how do I explain this, talk about my culture, but talk about Americans and how they view, people who are other, but also, love and acceptance and that sort of thing. And highly recommend that as well.
Yeah, and I just thinking of graphic novels, I cannot not mention Gene Luen Yang because he is such an amazing graphic novelist and has written quite a few graphic novels. But the one I want to point out is Boxer and Saints, which is actually two separate graphic novels, but they oftentimes come in a box set, and it basically follows the Boxer rebellion that happened in China. And Boxer tells it from the Boxer perspective, And then Saints tells it from the Christian perspective because it kind of was a conflict between those two groups of people within the country. And so you get this unified story, but half of it's told from one perspective and the other half is told from the other perspective. And then I just recently read Remy Lai's Pie in the Sky, which is also talking about food earlier. It's about a boy who basically makes pies and cakes in order to connect with it. Well, really cakes, but his dad called them Pie in the Sky, was the idea of his dad's like restaurant that he's gonna have. And his father has passed away, but his mother has decided to immigrate them to Australia to live out the dream they had had together for their children. And he's really struggling with this new world and with the fact that they left their father and they're doing this dream without his father. And so he decides, like, if I can make every single one of the cakes that was going to be on dad's menu, maybe everything will be okay. Except he's also not supposed to use the stove when his mom's not around. So he's also having to do this without her permission. So it's just kind of like him working through his experience as an immigrant, not knowing much English at all. And so struggling that in school. And then also just trying to like make these cakes because it's going to make him hopefully like heal the grief he's dealing with when it comes to his dad. So yeah. So those are all our recommendations. And you know, one of the things that we really want to do is have a little special section where we highlight a specific author. And so Laura, you want to kick it off?
So WLT sponsors an NSK award, which is the NSK Neustadt Prize for Children's Literature. Since 2003, the NSK Neustadt Prize for Children's Literature has been awarded every other year, to a living writer or author illustrator with significant achievement in children's or young adult literature.
So we thought over the year, because this is sponsored by WLT as well, that we would highlight some of the finalists from this past year NSK's award. And since we're doing Asia this month, we thought it would be appropriate to start with Linda Sue Park, who was nominated by Janet Wong. And the representative text that Janet used to nominate Linda Sue Park was Prairie Lotus, which Laura, I believe you've read.
Yeah. This was an historical fiction set, I think in the 1800s in one of the Dakotas, but it's about a Chinese American girl moving from California and then, living in this town that, doesn't really actually have very many interactions with Chinese American people. And it's like her interactions, her dealing with the racism, but also it's like historical fiction. And it felt very reminiscent of Laura Ingalls Wilder and, kind of like Anne of Green Gables-esque, but it was just like a really sweet story, like historical fiction, her standing up for herself, her figuring out like her place in the world, and then also pursuing her dreams. And I read it pretty recently and it just really stuck with me, and definitely something that I'm going to recommend to other people. But I know that Linda Sue Park has been writing for a while, and I remember reading several of her books when I was younger. I think the one that stands out is A Single Shard.
Yeah.
I remember it having a very large impact on my life, but obviously because it's been so long since I've read that one, I don't remember the fine details of the plot, but I remember the feeling and sitting there and like wrestling with it and kind of figuring out like, ooh, what am I going to take from this? What am I going to use on this?
Yeah, and Linda Sue Park tends to write historical fiction almost always. So Single Shard actually won her the 2002 Newbery Medal, and it's set in ancient China, like I think it's like 14th century, something like that. It's pretty old, and it's about like pottery. I don't know if you've seen the beautiful pottery that there's a special type of pottery that Chinese people are known for, and also Korean people are known for. And so she kind of weaves in the history of that with that book, and it's just such a beautiful story as well too. She also has written like Seesaw Girl, which is looking at again the culture differences there in Korea and very, very ancient Korea, both Single Shard and that. And then she wrote Project Mulberry, which is actually set in America. It was about a girl learning about silkworms because of a project, which she doesn't want to do because it's too connected to her Korean culture, but then she ends up doing it and really just falling in love with the process of like raising silkworms. And a book I read of hers recently was When My Name is Keiko, and this taught me about Korean culture in a way that I had never thought about before. I actually did not know that Korea was occupied by Japan, similar to that China was, and that there was this imperialistic power. And Koreans oftentimes were not allowed to use their Korean names, speak Korean, do anything that was Korean. They're supposed to identify as Japanese when the Japanese took over, and just how, they were basically an oppressed people who were being erased. And this book kind of explores that from a young girl's perspective, where she's wrestling with wanting to hold on to her culture. There's an example of like them celebrating the Olympics, but at the Olympics, they said his Japanese name instead of his Korean name, and her family being like, but he's Korean, you know, and just feeling really sad about that. And it was just so enlightening as far as that goes. One book that she has written that is actually not about Korea is A Long Walk to Water. And this was actually about South Sudan. And she co-wrote this with Salvador, who the story's about, even though it's slightly fictional. And I just found out recently, because his name's not on the cover, the reason for that was because it was coming out about the time that Sudan and South Sudan was splitting. And for safety reasons, he felt like it would be best for his name not to be on the book. So she has only her name is on the book, but this is a best-selling book. It's been a New York Times bestseller multiple times. I actually taught it for 5 years to a group of 6th graders when I was a teacher, and it is well beloved. And so in general, she's just a well beloved author. And so congratulations to her for being one of the finalists this year.
Yeah. No, so I mean, now that you've heard us speak at length on all of these AAPI authors, illustrators, voices, we will be sure and have all the books that we talked about linked in the description of this, because despite me knowing that you, of course, took copious notes and immediately went out to bookshop.org or wherever you buy books and was like, oh, I'm going to buy all of these ones that Bunmi and Louder are saying because they all sound, you know, fantastic.
Exactly.
But, you know, we're always looking for new reads, despite our voracious appetites. So if you ever have a recommendation, please feel free to write a comment. You know, we will read them and, you know, potentially comment back. But we're very thankful that WLT has given us this opportunity to just, you know, talk about books, which we already love, and just, you know, like have this weird little conversation between the two of us.
If you have not been to their website, please do go check out WLT.com. And if you've not seen their latest issue, it is gorgeous. And so you should definitely go grab it at a bookstore near you, or even just get it online. It's always so informative. I actually remember writing some of the like things in here when I was an intern, and kind of miss it. And I've done a few still here and there, some outposts here and there, but it's such a fun read. And so go grab a copy. All right, and now we're signing off, and we'd like to leave you with these words of inspiration.
So you may or may not know this quote from Emily Dickinson, but is, to travel far, there is no better ship than a book.
Or as Humpa Lahiri puts it, the thing about books, they let you travel without moving your feet.
See you next time, and happy reading.